Hi, today we're going to be making well, meatballs. We're trying something different today. We're going to do a two-parter. This is the first part, obviously, meatballs, and then tomorrow I'm going to make, and next week you're going to see the sauce that goes with them so that we can have spaghetti and meatballs. Uh, the recipe for both is something that was handed down from my grandmother to my mother, which is my paternal grandmother to my mother, so a little weird, uh, and then to me. I have made changes just like my mother made changes, just like my grandmother made changes to her mother's recipe. What I go for is something that is tasty yet easy to make. So, with the meatballs, we are going to need 2 pounds of ground meat. In this case, ground beef and ground turkey. Can you use all ground beef? Absolutely, you can. I just didn't like the fact that my sauce had an oil slick on the top of it from all beef meatballs. So I subbed in the turkey and it works out really well. We are also going to need 2 eggs. Those are our binder. Half of an onion. White onion here, you can use yellow. Don't use red. Red you want for raw preparations. This is not the time. You also want to have 13 ounces. That's one of these canisters of panko breadcrumbs, plain for preference. If you really want Italian seasoned breadcrumbs, go for it. If you don't like panko, I don't know what's wrong with you, but go ahead and use that anyway. For seasoning, all we need is our good friend kosher salt and pepper. We'll combine all of those into one bowl, and then from there, we will fry them. We are only going to be partially cooking these because they're going to finish in the sauce. I'll talk about that more as we get through this. So now that we have our meat in our bowl, we're going to begin with the onion, which we want only half of in this case. We want to leave the end on. Why do we want to leave the end on? To make it easier to cut. Now, as you can see, there are nice layers already in our onion that will make it easier to dice. We're just going to take our knife, make some nice little cuts. Now, this would be a lot more difficult if I hadn't left this piece holding it all together. Ooh, nice and thin. Cut through just like that to give ourselves nice chunks of onion. Now, once we have at least some of these chunks, we also want to come back through and just do a quick run of our knife through. I have found, eating this sauce for many, many years and feeding it to little children over the course of many, many years, that the smaller you make the onion piece, the less likely they are to notice it, the less likely they are to complain about it. That goes true for both making the meatballs and later the sauce. And in fact, I'm going to chop up this entire onion here and put half of it into a container that I can put in the fridge so that I have this for when I make sauce. Can you make the meatballs and the sauce at the same time? Absolutely you can. I've found, because I'm used to cooking for an army, that it gets a little unwieldy. This recipe will make approximately 40 meatballs, and that takes time. And when you're making 40 meatballs for an army, they get hangry. So you want to take as little time as you possibly can. All right, now this is nice and cut up. We're going to take it and put it in with our ground meat, which is off to the side and out of camera view so I can finish cutting up the rest of this onion now. These pieces didn't cooperate. So we're going to cut them the old-fashioned way into nice strips. Which we can then cut bits off of. I am thankfully not crying at the moment, though I can feel my eyes starting to tear up just a little bit, because I put this onion into the refrigerator before starting the recording. I left it in there for a few hours. I'm told that helps. I'm not sure what the true efficacy of that is, but it has alleviated at least some of the crying matter. This is an onion that doesn't have a lot of juice in it to create sulfuric acid in my eyeballs. One way or the other, it is important to get your onion cut up to go in with your meat. All right, so that's 1/4 of the onion. This one tried to sprout on me. We're going to do the same thing over here. Try to cut little notches in without going all the way through, so that we can then use the onion's own physiology to cut chunks out of it that are close to diced. And then from there we break them up so we can come back and just run our knife quickly through the onion. This is one of the faster ways that I have found to cut up an onion. The easiest possible way that I have found to cut up an onion is to let somebody else do it. I'm a big fan of that. It is a little more expensive to go to the store and buy pre-cut onion, but if that is what you want to do, and oftentimes that's what I want to do, I firmly endorse letting someone else do that part for you. It speeds up everything if you don't have to do this part, because this is perhaps the second most labor-intensive part of the entire process. The first being the actual formation of the meatballs themselves into ball shape. Okay, that's most of the onion taken care of. Let's finish this last bit. And then we can get to the actual building of the meatballs. I know, you're drooling, you're excited. It's okay. I'm a big fan of these. I actually managed to turn my wife into someone who likes meatballs after she tasted these. One thing that you may notice if you are a student of cuisine is that I'm not using cheese. Parmesan is typically used when making meatballs. I've asked what the point is of it, and I'm never given one that's satisfactory. Oh, it's for flavor. Okay, it's just for salt? Sure. I'll stick with adding regular salt. All right. That's that onion out of the way. Apologies for that minor time skip. As you can see, the onion is fully cut up now. The other half is in this lovely container. The voice inside my head that likes to say nasty things to me on occasion told me I was babbling and no one needed to see me cut up the rest of that onion, so I acquiesced, and here we are. Next up, we have our gigantic bowl with the meat and the onion in and ready to rock and roll. Now, we want to crack our eggs into the mix. Don't do that. Don't leave the shell in. I don't think that's good for anybody. Beat. Just start pulling everything together before we add anything else. Get the meat, the onion, and the egg to start mixing together. All right, now we want to add our salt. Doesn't need to be a ton. 2 heavy pinches is usually what I like to go with, and I'm noticing that tends to be what I do for almost everything. And then pepper again. Fresh ground pepper probably better, but that's not what I have available to me. So we mix that all in. Nice and mixed together. Then we got our breadcrumbs. Once again, panko breadcrumbs. They are Japanese style breadcrumb. They are bigger, a little thicker, crispier than your standard breadcrumb. And I think they add a nice bit of texture to this. Now, for any grandmothers who are watching this, yes, I'm going to get in with my hands in just a moment, but also, shouldn't you already know how to do this? Why are you watching me? Doesn't make any sense. All right. Once we've got a little mix together, if I could talk, it would be wonderful. You'd think I'd have the ability to do that without making any kind of weird sounds, but I'm human, and I make mistakes, especially when I am not on a script of any sort, so I am just babbling. Okay, so we're in here combining this by hand, getting everybody nice and together. This is a nice place to work out any minor aggression you might have. It's nice feeling to squeeze the mix. Makes you feel like you're squeezing something. What it is, I'm not going to say, because this is a family program. At least it's a program for families. All right. Have a nice homogeneous mix at this point. Now it's time to start forming meatballs. So what we want to do, what I do anyway, I get a ball of meat in my hand. It's about the size of my cupped hand. Anything that's coming out, sides I pull off, and then I roll. Just like that. Set that aside. Do it again. Get everything out. Doesn't fit in the hand. Like that. One more. Okay. So that's 3 to start. Now, if you want to make these, I don't know, for soup, say you're doing an Italian wedding and you decide you want to do these kinds of meatballs for it, I recommend going smaller. Something maybe this big. But that is going to be largely up to you and what you choose to do. Now that all the meatballs are formed, we have ourselves a pan on the stove with some olive oil in it. Well, not just some, quite a bit of olive oil in it to coat the bottom. On medium, well, slightly over medium heat, we're going to place our meatballs into the nice hot pan. I start on the outside. I'm not trying to crowd the pan. Just gently adding the meatballs. Outer ring, inner ring. If you have any substantially sized meatballs, those are great to put in the center. I don't exactly have a giant meatball in this case, but we do what we can with what we have. Now, the goal here is to get a nice golden brown outside on these meatballs. Doesn't need to be all the way around golden brown, but it adds to the flavor, so that's what we're looking for. So give them a chance to actually cook. Don't be too quick to turn them. Also important that we make sure our pan is nice and hot when we get started, so they don't just sit in the oil. Okay, that is what we're going for right there. Nice bit of brown. Just going to turn the meatball, try to get each side a little bit of brown. Now, if you are like me and have a stove that does not like to cook evenly, it can be important to rotate your pan. Notice how the ones closer to the center are cooking faster. It's often what you're going to find, especially if you're cooking on a gas range, so be careful. Other thing to watch out for when cooking is if you have a seam in your meatball piece where it just wants to crack or it looks like it didn't fully form together, that is a good part to have face down in the pan first so that it browns more quickly and you have less chance of the meatball falling apart on you. As I said earlier, we are only partially cooking these. These are not going to finish in the pan. In fact, in my case, what's going to happen with these is they are going to be allowed to cool down on a nice wire rack over top of a oven roasting, or, oh, good Lord, why can't I think? It's just a pan, Josh. It's just a pan. Words today are not my friends. We'll let them dry out. That way, once they're cool, they'll get bagged up and go into the fridge, where they will await the sauce tomorrow. If you want to eat these right away, I Strongly recommend, once they're brown, finishing them in a 350-degree oven until you reach an internal temperature commensurate with the fact that you're cooking fowl, and that's 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74 Celsius. If I somehow manage to have someone from across the pond or in any other country watching this. Just keep turning them. The middle is going to cook faster. And you are going to notice that the meatballs are going to get smaller. Another option, once you've got some brown on these, it's something my mother did occasionally, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe this is one of those things I just dreamt up on my own. Crock pot, meatballs, and barbecue sauce, and just leave it out for a party. Not something I personally have done, but I have a memory of my mother doing that at least once, perhaps more than once. Just different ways to utilize these. For me, though, there's only one real application, and that's in spaghetti sauce, tomato sauce that is, and from there into my belly. You can see these are getting a nice brown on them. And try to eliminate as much of the external pink as you possibly can. Before you start evacuating them. All right. Looks like these are good for what I need them for. This is most definitely what we're aiming for. Nice golden brown color. So I am going to evacuate these to the aforementioned rig, where they will be allowed to drain off any remaining oil and cool down for tomorrow. Now, store these in a zip top bag overnight. If, however, you're making these well in advance and you want to store these long term, I strongly recommend getting yourself a food saver and vacuum sealing them. Again, once they are well and truly cooled down, you do not want to try to seal these while they're hot. You'll trap in steam, and you'll trap in all kinds of liquid that will not make for good eating later on. Second batch goes in. We're, again, not trying to crowd the pan. We start out on the outside, and we go around the rim before we go into a second layer. These bad boys are going to cook just like the first batch. They will be evacuated to a rig, again, just like that first batch. Then they will go into the zip tie bag and into my fridge for overnight storage. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you make my meatballs. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the payoff for all that work that you did with the meatball. Of course, this deals with part 2, which you'll have to wait till next week to see to get the lovely sauce all around the meatball. But bad boy is fully cooked and can be split by just a fork. Look at that. Beautiful. Tasty meatball. Holds together very, very well on the fork. These are something that your family is going to keep coming back for.